Today's topic is ancient Egypt, the Egyptian gods. We have some academic vocabulary, stories, and gods we will talk about today. Here is our academic vocabulary words for this lesson today. Monotheism is the study or belief of one God. Polytheism is the study or belief of many gods. Mythology is about traditional stories about gods and heroes. They often explain how or why things happen. During the ancient times, man has need to explain to himself the origins and wonders of the world around him. The mountains, the oceans, the changing seasons, earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and the existence of animals, including mankind. Early, man in every culture on earth has made up stories about how things happen and invented gods and supernatural beings to comfort and instruct them. In some countries, such as ancient Egypt, the kings or pharaohs were looked upon as gods. Now, let's do a comprehension check. If we are talking about someone who believes in many gods, who would they be? Monotheistic or polytheistic? You're right, polytheistic. The Egyptians believed that in the beginning there were only waters of chaos. This included darkness and silence, until a heap of earth arose from the waters, forming land. The Creator, in the form of a phoenix with flaming plumage, flew to the land and let out a piercing cry. This was the first sound, and silence was shattered forever. Now the Creator was alone in the beginning, and he wanted some company. Because he had no mate, his thoughts created other gods and goddesses. Following Shu, his thoughts produced a daughter, Tefnut, who represented moisture. Following their creation, Shu and Tefnut sunk back into the abyss of the waters, and they were raised by Nun. Ra, the sun god, the most important god of Egypt. The Egyptians believed that the sun's daily path across the sky was Ra sailing through the sky on his boat. At nightfall, Ra's boat was attacked by a great serpent, Apep, and other forces of chaos who wanted to destroy the sun. The wise and powerful Ra always knew what to do to fend off these attacks. He, along with the fierce god Set, who guarded the ship with spear in hand, always on the lookout for the foes of Ra. Ra was said to have created all forms of life and was the supreme ruler of the gods. The secret name. Ra was known by many names, but there was one that had not been spoken since the beginning of time. That name was kept a secret. Anyone who knew this name would be able to possess the power over him and the world he had created. One of the goddesses, Isis, was very interested in learning Ra's secret name. Isis was the mistress of magic. She dreamt that she would have a falcon-headed son named Horus. The wise Isis knew that nothing was powerful enough to destroy the Creator, but the Creator himself. Isis came up with a plan to find Ra's secret name so that Horus, her son, could obtain his power. Ra was very old and would often drool. He would take walks through his kingdom each day. One day, Isis hid in the bushes after Ra had walked by. She collected some of his drool from the ground. She shaped the drool into the form of a snake and chanted spells over it. The next day, Isis carried the lifeless-shaped snake on the path where Ra walked. While Ra was walking along the path, the snake came to life and bit Ra on the ankle. It then melted into the earth as a pile of clay. Ra screamed loudly as the poison began to take its effect on Ra. His teeth chattered and his limbs shook. He knew something terrible had happened to him. Soon, all his children were standing around him. They wept, fearing that he might die. Isis stood along with the others, pretending to be distressed. She asked Ra if he wanted her help. She told him that if he would tell her his secret name, that she could cure his illnesses. He refused her offer, but his pain soon became too great to bear. He ordered everyone to leave except for Isis. He whispered his secret name to Isis, telling her that she could give the power to her son. Ra warned Isis that her son must never betray him. Isis took the poison out of Ra by chanting a spell over him. Ra regained his strength and returned to his boat of 1,000,000 years. Isis was joyful that her son could someday sit on the throne of Egypt and have the powers of Ra. Thoth, god of knowledge. Ra also made Thoth the keeper of records, telling him to record the deeds of men. Thoth was also the inventor of the spoken and written language. He became lord of books and scribe to the gods. Thoth was also credited for the invention of astronomy, geometry, and medicine. He was also said to have written the Book of the Dead. The first mummy. Ra made Osiris king of Egypt and Isis his queen. Osiris was a good king. He was kind and wise. He showed the people of Egypt how to grow crops. He gave them laws and taught them to know and worship gods. Osiris traveled to other lands, doing the same for their people. Set, brother of Osiris, became jealous and would have taken his throne when Osiris was gone if Isis, known as the mother goddess, had not been left to rule in Osiris's absence. Isis did not trust Set and watched him closely. She was a beautiful wife and a protective mother. Her symbol was the moon. Isis was also the goddess of healing and childbirth. At night, Isis would visit the sick, gently brushing them with her wings as she said magical incantations to heal them. Set made a beautiful box like a coffin, made to the exact measurements of Osiris. Then Set invited Osiris and other people to a great feast. When everyone had finished eating, Set displayed the box and said that he'd give it to anyone who fitted inside. Everyone tried, but it only fitted Osiris. While he was still inside, Set and his friends quickly slammed on the lid and threw the box in the Nile River. Set returned to the city and told everyone of his brother's death. He was quickly crowned the new king of Egypt. Isis heard the news and was filled with grief. She cut off her hair and dressed as a widow. She traveled the earth, lamenting while looking for her dead husband's body. She searched and searched, following one rumor after another, never finding him. She asked everyone she met, and finally, some children told her where it was. Isis mourned for her dead husband. Then she hid the body, while she went back to look after her son Horus, still a baby. Set was terrified that Isis might be able to bring Osiris back from the dead, since she was a great magician. So Set found where she had hidden the body and cut it into pieces, which he then scattered it up and down the Nile River. Now Isis had to find all the scattered pieces of Osiris. Using all the spells that she knew, Isis was unable to keep him on the earth. Isis wrapped up the pieces and buried him. He became the first mummy. Osiris himself became the king of the dead, and all the Egyptians hoped they would join him after death. Osiris, god of the dead, or underworld. Osiris was not only ruler of the dead, but also the power that granted all life from the underworld, from sprouting vegetation to the annual flood of the Nile River. Isis, goddess of magic and marriage and wisdom. Isis is the first daughter of Geb, god of the earth, and Nut, goddess of the sky. She married Osiris and had a son named Horus. Isis was able to bring Osiris back to life when he was murdered by Set. Using her magical skills, she restored his body to life after having gathered the body parts that had been tossed about the land by Set. This myth became very important during the Greco-Roman period because the Egyptians believed that the Nile River flooded every year from the tears of Isis's sorrow when Osiris was murdered. Osiris's death and rebirth was relived each year through rituals. Hathor, goddess of protection, love, and joy. Hathor was the wife of Horus and sometimes thought of as the mother of the pharaoh. She was known as the mistress of the West, welcoming the dead into the next life. Hathor was connected with foreign places and materials. She was known to be the goddess of the desert and turquoise mines in the Sinai. Horus, god of the sky. When Horus was a baby, his father Osiris was killed by Set. Years later, he went to war with Set to get his father's crown and kingdom. The battles raged for a long time. Once Set managed to blind Horus by taking out his eye and tearing it into bits, but Thoth, the god of wisdom, managed to heal his eye. The eye became a symbol of protection for the ancient Egyptians. After this battle, Horus was chosen to be the ruler of the world of the living. Anubis, god of cemeteries and embalming. Anubis invented embalming to embalm Osiris, the first mummy. He was the guide of the dead. The Egyptians embalmed their dead, especially their pharaohs, to preserve them, since they thought that this helped them to live forever. Sekhmet, the goddess of war, the powerful one. One time Ra, the sun god, was angry with mankind because they laughed at him. He said he'd send down his anger as Sekhmet, the eye of Ra. She went down to earth, killing men and drinking their blood. She started to frighten Ra, who only wanted to punish mankind, not destroy them all. He dyed some beer red. It would look like blood. When Sekhmet saw the beer, she was thirsty for blood, so she drank it all, got drunk, and went to sleep. When she woke up, Ra persuaded her to stop killing mankind. Bastet, a protective goddess. Bastet usually was seen as a gentle protective goddess. She was seen as a defender of the pharaoh and Ra. Ammit, devourer or soul eater. Ammit lived near the scales of justice in Duat, the Egyptian underworld. In the Hall of Two Truths, Anubis weighed the heart of a person against the feather of Mut, the goddess of truth, which was depicted as an ostrich feather. If the heart was judged to be not pure, Ammit would devour it, and the person undergoing judgment was not allowed to continue their voyage towards Osiris and immortality. Once Ammit was swallowed the heart, the soul was believed to become restless forever. Set, god of storms, desert, chaos, and war. The Egyptians saw Set as the god of darkness and chaos. He was also the lord of the desert. He became the god of unclean and an opponent of several gods. This is all the time we have for today. Realize there are many other gods in Egyptian mythology. Before we go, can you name one thing you didn't know before this presentation? What else would you like to know about the Egyptian gods?